Of all of the artists to come out of the cloud rap and larger SoundCloud movement of the early 2010s, there wasn't one more interesting than Young Lean. There was something special about his almost performance art aesthetic and community, cultivated by mixing together mismatched pop culture found on the internet, but he struggled with being seen as a gimmick, and had to slowly prove himself in the industry with his signature cryptic, dreamy, emo-like lyrics that touched on consumeristic themes, depression, and substance abuse. Growing up in a different landscape than that of the music he was inspired by, creating a sound that wasn't similar to anything else at the time. It wasn't American rap, it wasn't Swedish rap. It sounds close enough to the cloud rap style of artists on the come up, but it was just far enough away to still be seen as alien. Combining vulnerable, honest, and nihilistic views with anti-establishment themes to create a sad sound and image, a safe space for many to find themselves. Through his art, him and his friends changed the course of popular music forever, being some of the biggest artists in an important movement in our music history. But now he isn't given the mainstream recognition he deserves, and has become a cautionary tale for what happens when fame and success comes too early and too soon. Growing up between Minsk and Stockholm due to his parents holding high government positions, he often found himself in the isolating and depressing environment of Sweden, leaving him with untapped teen angst, which can especially be seen in his early music and melancholy aesthetic. In his high school years, Lean began working at a local McDonald's, where he would routinely get in trouble for doing graffiti and experimenting with drugs, eventually being put on probation. It was here where he would discover his love for music, and would cite his earliest musical influences as American rappers like Lil B, 50 Cent, and Smoke Ghost Perp, which he was able to discover early on in his creative journey with the use of the internet, a place where he could find solace, and would eventually become key in his journey as an artist and person. Later that year, he teamed up with Young Good and Sherman, two other local musicians Lean's age, after they met in a park and learned they had similar musical interests. They would then form Hosh Boys, which included Gravity Boys Shield Gang members Blade, Echo 2K, Thai Boy Digital, and White Armor. However, the trio would later split off and found the Sad Boys Collective, known for their depressive and heartfelt yet chaotic style, with Good and Sherman making beats, and Lean rapping and singing over them with his signature vocal stylings. It's no surprise that they are able to secure performances at local venues, becoming known within their area and genre. In early 2013, Young Lean released Gangston Strip 2002 on YouTube, which blew up instantly with 81 million views at the making of this video. This hit was extremely unseen, as Lean was only 17 and the group did this without having any major label pushing it, becoming Lean's first taste of success, and really putting the group on the map. The song was extremely experimental and ahead of its time, a breath of fresh air for the community, and gave a sense for what was to come.
Popping pills like sits while someone vomits on your mosquito tits. Slitting wrists while dark evil spirits like slithering with tricks. I'm sick, acid drip makes my spitting sick and makes me start hitting chicks.
This was the beginning of the group cultivating a large fanbase in internet culture, with many on the web at the time being attached and attracted to the Sad Boys, chanting any nihilistic catchphrases that the group would peddle. Later that year, they had their first official release with Unknown Death 2002. Strong with the cloud rap style and tone of Lean's earlier work, the album still holds up to this day, with many songs that if released now, would be just as big. Taking style inspiration from game soundtracks, southern rap, and even house and vaporwave at times. It's also abundantly clear that songs like Night Vision and Gatorade would become very influential for artists to come. Facing this unexpected success, they began touring around Europe, where they would be noticed by Brian Matchik, the owner of Hippos and Tanks, a prestigious US record label that specialized in avant-garde and experimental music, and helping those artists build careers, with talents like Dean Blunt and Grimes. After meeting the Sad Boys at a James Favreau concert, he became their US manager, and was an instrumental figure in their careers, helping them travel to the US to tour and expand their audience even further.
Baron went to Sweden, Stockholm, with James Favreau, who was doing a show.
Vi skulle dit för att kolla på se spelningen för alla var fans av James Favreau.
And James Favreau introduced Baron. He says, "Yeah, this band's bothering me." And they gave him the music. They gave him Kyoto.
Baron utstrålade någonting extra. Han var liksom så här, kom in direkt och tog över rummet liksom och väldigt energisk och motiverad och intresserad.
And so Baron met me in England later on in that month. He says, "I found something really cool." I said, "Baron, if you like him, sign him." So what happened was in the end of May, he gets a phone call. They want to sign with us.
It was late 2014 when the Sad Boys would release their second mixtape, Unknown Memory, which had beats in production that were even better than Unknown Deaths. Young Sherm, White Armor, and Good were developing a deep creative style, drawing from tons of different influences all across the music industry, while still being able to stay under their unique genre. Lean also showed off his improved vocals and expanded musical scale, which put a huge emphasis on autotune, something that was relatively unexplored in the music community at the time. The group was also able to expand past their local Swedish artists, with Lean having a feature from Travis Scott on Ghost Town, which was one of the best songs on the album, with other large hits like Yoshi City and Lean World. During this time, Young Lean and the Sad Boys probably became the biggest underground artists due to their albums, YouTube uploads, and US touring. However, a common theme while touring in the States was substance abuse, becoming a disturbing routine presence in their group dynamic. In the spring of 2015, Lean, Sherm, Blade, and their managers all stayed in a condo in Miami to work on their next big project, Warlord. This would be Jonathan's first time recording in a professional studio. However, according to his primary manager, Emilio, this fantasy turned dark very quickly. After the recording sessions in Miami ended, Emilio and Sherman flew back to Sweden while Lean and Blade stayed behind to head up to New York to do a couple more shows. I remember I felt like, why is he gonna stay, said Sherman. Why isn't he just going home? We've been away for so long. What is he gonna do here now? It seems so unnecessary for him to stay. Later that week, Lean would take a turn for the worse, becoming dependent on a mixture of weed, promethazine, Xanax, and cocaine, which led to troubling effects. He found himself slipping in and out of psychosis, dressing up as a nurse in hospital scrubs and carrying around a knife. The drugs would keep him up most nights, so he would stand on the balcony and write a book on his phone about his childhood nightmares where people would be turned into rats, and would frequently talk about seeing ghosts. This drug-fueled breakdown would climax on the 5th of April. Lean, high and overcome with interconnectedness, would detach from reality, destroying the condo and cutting himself. Blade would call 911 and Jonathan was hospitalized. While he was in the hospital, he would become paranoid from the separation from his music on his hard drive, and was able to convince Baron to drive it to him in the early hours of the 8th. While high on Xanax, Baron would drift off the road and drive into a traffic post at 60 miles per hour. Bystanders were ultimately able to pull the passenger out, but Baron was unable to get out of the car in time, and tragically passed away. After this fatal accident and his breakdown, Jonathan would return to Sweden with his father, where he would spend 2 months in the countryside, while Good tried to piece together the incomplete tracks. After this, he felt stable enough to go back to Stockholm, where he took the opportunity to return to normal life, taking up a job in a shampoo factory alongside Sherman, Blade, and White Armor, later saying that it was a humbling experience. He also sought to reconnect and get much closer to his father as they had a difficult relationship growing up. Lean was making a full recovery, and his next project was set to release, but Baron's father ultimately never forgave young Lean or any of the Sad Boys, and blamed them for his son's death. But Lean was ready to put this behind him, and reflect on the whole experience on Warlord. Released in February 2016, it was filled with cold, industrial, and chilling sounds, with sharp synths, deep and dark lyrics, and shifted away from his typical cloud rap in favor of a more punk harsh sound, which Lean has said he was always a big fan of, which specifically stands out on tracks like Highway Patrol, Miami Ultra, and Hoover. It also definitely has themes that reflect his mental state while going through these recordings in Miami, with violent and rough vocals in addition to the dark writing and ambient sounds. After this, Lean would take a step back from his music and expand creatively by creating Sad Boys Entertainment, a fashion line which included designs and modeling by fellow Sad Boys and Drain Gang members. Jonathan would also model for Calvin Klein alongside fellow artists Young Thug and Frank Ocean, who coincidentally featured vocals from Lean on his critically acclaimed 2016 album Blonde. I've done my rap stuff. I've proved that. Now I'm just gonna keep making my art in whichever way I want. In late December, Lean would quickly return to his own work to release Frost God, a mixtape that would serve sonically as a transitional period between Warlord and his next album, Stranger. Released in 2017, this album would show the maturity that Lean experienced in the past 2 years with the melodic and downtrodden production or the emotional vocals and sound. The aesthetic of the album is one that many point to as being the quintessential young Lean aesthetic, with a deep atmosphere of nihilistic and emo themes, which I think is Lean at his best. The album also has some of his biggest songs like Red Bottom Sky, Muddy Sea, Yellow Man, and especially Agony. In this song, Lean depicts a multitude of hallucinations and visions that he experiences while on drugs. It's a sad yet beautiful listen that leaves you almost comforted and hopeful for what is to come, even with its depressing topic and subject, accomplishing this with its dreamy piano melody and childlike choir in the background.
But the overall feeling I get is one of sadness, but there's some optimism here, I feel. A guy who's completely at the end of his rope, and a guy who's just sort of given up. There's hope here. There's and there's beauty in some of the combination of words. Gives the feeling of somebody who has been through a lot of pain and is recuperating, but is optimistic and is finding comfort in the music he's creating. It's a good feeling.
The intro and outro to Stranger also stand out to me, with him giving reasons to excuse his paranoia and introverted nature. Stranger is overall a departure from Jonathan's usual persona and sad boy's gimmick, one that many have questioned due to their elaborate outfits, music, videos, and overall aesthetic. But this project seems to be more genuine to what many believe Lean to be, probably because it feels like his first truly personal album, separate from the sad boy's legacy, and much, much more thoughtful and peaceful than his previous work. This work also feels extremely distant from his provocative and somewhat ironic past, serving as an ending to young Lean, and bridging the gap between his music and personal life after years of struggling. The next mixtape that Lean would drop would be a collaboration with White Armor that debuted at number 44 on the Swedish album charts. You put out 3 rap albums, then you can do whatever you like, he said in response to this shift in vocals and beats that we saw on Stranger and once again on Poison Ivy. Happy Feet and Bender Girlfriend being perfect examples of his new experimental vocals. This shift in creativity in his music is due to his aliases, which allowed him to have free reign in what he released, going for a post-punk, indie rock, and neo-folk approach to these 2 side projects, which also helped him disassociate with his persona that he had built up with Young Lean. The sentiment that I've heard with Poison Ivy is that it's almost too cohesive, and shows great refinement that over time it's just been seen as another stepping stone in his career, but it wouldn't be as chastised as 2 most recent releases. In 2020, Lean shocked the world with the release of Stars. In typical Lean fashion, he drifts from his dark, melancholy sound in favor of a quiet and lighter one. Not to say that Lean's earlier work lacked lyrically, but he was really able to shine on Stars, with a great sense for wordplay and storytelling and poetic meaning. On songs like Yayo and Acid at 7-Eleven, he continues his introspective journey to cope and connect with the Miami trip and his past substance abuse that led him to become a better person and the Lean we know today. Many critics were quick to write off Stars as boring or emotionless, saying that he didn't try hard enough after his best work, Stranger. But for me, on second to third listen, it began to grow on me, and it's still a good album and the step in the right direction for Jonathan, shifting and changing his style, which is perfectly countered by White Armor's production that has also been able to match Lean's aesthetic and ever-changing styles. It's also commendable that Lean has been able to strive away from his old catalog of quite polarizing music in favor of songs that sound like they could have come from a completely different artist entirely, which he continues on his most recent work, Stardust. With an experimental pop and post-punk take on his already established sound and tone, with many overarching themes of love, commercial appeal, success, and materialistic value from his previous works, Stardust features a diverse range of prominent artists, some of which have been major influences on Lean's career, such as Skrillex and Salem's Jack Donahue, who basically laid the groundwork for cloud rap, and it can especially be seen in the Sad Boys production and instrumentals. There are great songs in the album like Bliss, but to me it just stands out as one of his weaker projects. However, while not my favorite from Lean, it continues to remove the limits that he has put on his genre and expanded, showing great potential for where he's able to go in the industry, which he's had great influence in that can't be overstated. He's been pushed together with other sad SoundCloud rappers from the time, but Lean has always been different from the start. He never had these major labels to sign under, and growing up in a time and place where new ideas and thinking were shunned, there was hardly a central point for his reference in his style. It's mostly all grassroots and original. The Sad Boys were just some kids from Stockholm messing around with autotune and making beats. They by no means thought that they would be going mainstream. So it's crazy to think how big of an influence they've had on music. It's fair to ask what Travis, Playboi Carti, Post Malone, and even artists like X and Juice would sound like without pioneers over the SoundCloud scene like Jonathan. So it's quite bizarre to hear people discredit the group's impact on music, seeing that they're no more than gimmicks and untalented, acting as if they haven't made any progression since their cloud rap heavy debut. But I would argue that this unlikely collective of teens have been heading the exploration of some of the most experimental and diverse sides of music in recent years, with Jonathan putting out more art that he's been able to personally connect with, distancing himself from his traumatic past, moving forward, and ever evolving.
Jag kommer ihåg, jag frågade min mormor någon gång, vad är det viktigaste i livet? Jag var 100 på att hon skulle säga liksom att få en dotter eller en familj eller att älska eller vad som helst. Men då sa hon att utvecklas. Jag blev helt så här, ja okej, mormor, du kanske har jobbat lite för mycket i ditt liv. Men sen tänkte jag på det, och det kanske inte är det viktigaste, men det är det händer ju naturligt. Men om man liksom gör något mer och mer och mer, så hör man själv hur man utvecklas och man ser det själv, att liksom man blir bättre. Man liksom ger sitt liv till att göra andra glada eller få andra att känna känslor som de inte vågar känna. Det gör mig rätt glad alltså.